297 administrative board meetings. Retirement should have come sooner than that, I would dare say. It is a rare privilege for me to be allowed to participate in a celebration like this one for a man that I have known and respected both close up and far away for over 40 years. I don't intend to catalog the astonishing list of accolades he's garnered, all based on solid and persistent achievements of the most varied kinds, since my and our time is, after all, limited. To reel off such a list would tax credulity and our individual backsides. So I'll resist the temptation to test us all in this way. Neither do I intend to speak to the clearly sterling character, the unimpeachable rectitude, the rich and wonderful attributes possessed by this evening's honoree. Well, you may ask, if I'm not going to applaud accomplishments or laud vast capacities, then why exactly was I asked to fly up here and talk at all? Well, I must admit, I admit to being a bit surprised by this invitation, but I assume it may have something to do with Mouzon's and my somewhat unusual relationship. Well, are you intrigued now? You know, I frankly cannot remember when we first met, but I vividly do remember my first impression of the man. I found him simply too good to be true. He was tall, he was inordinately handsome, and he wore, even then, a quite prominent diamond stick pin thrust through an impeccable tie that adorned an equally impeccable suit. It was in the 1970s in southern Louisiana. I was dressed in a lime green suit. I know you're all desperately sorry I didn't find that suit to wear this evening. That suit was enhanced with a tie that I'm sure didn't match, though in the case of that suit, that may have been no particularly bad thing. I was thoroughly devoid of anything that smacked even faintly of diamonds. I was making $6,000 a year and was mighty glad of it. Upon meeting Mouzon Biggs, recently named as a pastor in Beaumont, Texas, as I remember, I quickly summed him up as another one of those slick preachers, a football field long and a micron deep, given to sweet stories and simple bromides designed to propel him up the ladder of Methodist success. Well, you know the type. And I, newly minted PhD in the Hebrew Bible and fully as green as my suit, thought I surely knew the type too. In short, I was a fool, albeit a very smart fool, to be sure. Mouzon and I, you see, embarked on a brief series of revivals together. No, we didn't tote a tent along the sawdust trail, just to make the record clear. He would preach, and I would do Bible study and sing. Well, it was hardly an act to rival Billy Graham and George Beverly Shea, but I thought we were a pretty admirable team. But that's not what I took from those few occasions, a sense of great evangelistic enterprises in the making. I early discovered that my snap assessment of Mouzon Biggs was wildly off the mark. Snap assessments are often wildly off the mark, but this one was particularly egregious. Here was no Teflon preacher with snappy sermon starters, tear-stained tales, and bravura endings designed to assuage the comfortable and suction cash from the willing. No, this was a thoughtful man who continued to read the scripture with energy and commitment and imagination, who refused to rest on seminary learnings in a world that demanded continuous and rigorous study if the gospel of Jesus were to be heard by those whose ears had been blocked by the multiple lures of a selfish and a sinful world. Oh, he had the hair all right, yeah. And the suits and the ties and the diamond stick pin, yeah. But the hair and the suits and the diamond did not begin to tell what this man really was. As we all here know, His stay in Beaumont was soon interrupted by a trip to Tulsa and this extraordinary and grand church. My own connection to this church was rather close. One of its former pastors ordained me to the ministry, and another was a colleague at my first teaching post at Texas Wesleyan College. And after my return to Perkins as a member of the faculty in 1979, I was honored to preach a series of sermons here more years ago than my retired brain can remember, I'm sorry to say. But let me tell you one more thing quite amazing about your longtime pastor. Whenever I came within a reasonable distance of Tulsa to offer the study of some portion of the Bible, something I have done more than a few times over the years, Mouzon Biggs would almost invariably appear among the students in those classes. I cannot begin to tell you how rare that is. How really rare it is. When a preacher becomes the pastor of a large church, it's usually the case that their student days end. They are the ones asked to teach and preach and have no intention of listening to anyone else, especially some bearded weirdo from a seminary who thinks he knows more than he actually does. I mean, what can an ivory tower egghead teach me, super pastor that I am? I caricature, but not very much, I'm afraid. Not so with Mouzon. He's ever been the student, keeping his ears open for new ideas and new trends and new possibilities for the presentation of the gospel. It is no surprise to me at all that his long list of achievements includes work with Jews and Muslims and the calls for justice across any number of divides in our culture. Only a man who wants to listen at least as much as he wants to talk will gain such distinctions. Our culture, as we all know too well, is rife with talkers, mouths that move too often in direct proportion to the lack of movement in their brains and hearts. Mouzon Biggs speaks and listens to and keeps his brain and heart alive to the riches of God's movements in any number of surprising people and places. And so, with hair and tie and suit and stick pin in place, Mouzon Biggs has done the work of the gospel here and around the world. It's been our privilege to see him do that. And we know that, though on occasion that suit and tie may now be removed, the stick pin placed in its velvet box, with the fabled hair just a bit thinner, I know whereof I speak, after all. God is hardly through with him yet, and thank God, not through with us either. There is a famous retiree in the Bible that you may perhaps have not heard tell of. He may be the sort of person that turns up on the $1,000 box of a Jeopardy category of Bible persons. Ready? Who is Barzillai the Gileadite? Now, you may find his story in the second book of Samuel in the 19th chapter. David's rebellious son Absalom has been killed by David's bloody general Joab after Absalom had thrown his father out of Jerusalem and attempted to make himself king. During David's exile from the city, Barzillai was a loyal and faithful friend to the king. As a reward, David invites the aged Barzillai to come back to Jerusalem with him, to spend his final days in the luxury and ease of the court. But Barzillai will have none of this. How many years do I still have left to live that I should go up with the king to Jerusalem? Today, I am 80 years old. Can I at my age discern what is pleasant and what is not? Can your servant taste what he eats or what he drinks? Can I still listen to the voice of singing men and women? Please let your servant return so that I may die in my own town near the graves of my father and mother. Now, let me quickly say that I cast no aspersions on the honoree tonight with this story, suggesting that he is old and incapable now of hearing song and tasting food. His appetite appears to me undimmed and his hearing little impaired. I remind us of this Bible tale to suggest that people who know who they are have little need of the high life of any sort of court as reward for their good service. Nor do I imply by the story that Mouzon will merely slip off into a silent redoubt and await a pleasant death. The story speaks of a man who knows who he is and what he has needed and really needs from his life. And Mouzon has lived his life in the light of what the Apostle Peter was quoted as saying in the book of the Acts. I truly understand, said the apostle, that God shows no partiality. But in every nation and place, anyone who fears and loves God and who does what is right is fully acceptable to God. He has taught us this great lesson again with his life. And for that, each of us can genuinely be grateful. Thank you, my friend, for that life. And a most rewarding and fulfilling and happy retirement to you, filled with food and song and the sweet clatter of grandchildren's feet. Your witness will outlast you for ages and people to come.